Hello, everyone, and welcome to the First Class Lacrosse podcast. My name is Deemer Class, and I will be joined today by my co-host, Matt Dunn. As we officially launch our podcast this fall, we will be bringing you exclusive interviews with the best men's and women's coaches in the game. With that being said, we are thrilled to welcome the winningest coach in Division I men's lacrosse history, Duke's John Danowski. For some background on Coach, he is a three-time national champion, two-time gold medalist, and the first Division I head coach to reach 400 career wins, and a 2013 ESPY nominee. Coach also has his master's degree in psychology and is heading into his 18th season at Duke. Coach coached me for 4 years at Duke and coached Matt Dunn for Team USA in 2023. With that, Coach D, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, it's great to see you guys. Number one, it's great to have the faces, now with all the new technology. And it's great to be part of this, man. And I'm excited.
Great to have you here, Coach. We have a quick opener. That's a question that I know you like to ask, guys, because we're curious, and so is everybody else. What are you reading these days?
Oh, that's a great question. A combination of things. But I think the Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. It's short. Ryan Holiday is a great series of books. Just to kind of, I don't know, keep you in line with, what's important to help you stay grounded. I'm just finishing that up now.
I know Deemer and I have spoken. We've got into the Ryan Holiday books. I read Discipline is Destiny. Obstacle is the Way. Ego is the Enemy. He's great. Easy reads too.
Yeah. And it's, I think a lot of things that we do as athletes and a lot of things that we do as coaches, a lot of things that we read about, we do either instinctively, we've been taught it before, we just don't verbalize it. We haven't taken the time to sit down and really write it down. But I think, not to say that it's redundant, but I think a lot of us live those lives. We just don't know that we're living those lives.
I appreciate that. And I feel like you are a guy that I picked up on the Team USA process, always kind of reading things. You always bring new things you were reading to us. I thought it was a great question to ask because I steal that with some of my guys now. And just a way to get to know people and like what they're interested in their free time. All right. We got one more thing before we get into the meat of the podcast, Coach. We have an online community where we have coaches that log on. They have access to drills and webinars and things like that. We gave them the opportunity to ask a few questions or submit some questions for you. So we're going to get through those questions first, and then we'll roll through with everything else. The first question we have here is from Ryan Richardson. He attended a Duke online clinic with you guys a few years ago, and he said he remembers seeing a goals board that had a list of items you checked off: riding, ground balls, clearing, etc. And he was wondering, how do you use this goals board when talking with players and working with the coaching staff to adjust practice and concepts for them?
I think one of the things that, there's always the game within the game. Every sport does it. I remember, I think it was Shuby Brown in basketball, they talked about, how they measured defensive intensity. And it was by the number of deflections during a game, right? Which kind of makes sense, right? Defensively, if you're closing out and if you can deflect a pass or even if it goes out of bounds, it's kind of a factor of intensity, which is hard to measure. Now with GPS systems and catapult and all that, I guess you can measure it in other ways. But, it's one of the things that you're trying to win those battles. For example, the face-off piece, it's not just your draw man, it's your wing play. It's the offensive box, the defensive box, your ability to clear the ball, if you throw it backwards. It's offensive efficiency in the face-off game. Can you generate some offense? Whether it's, goals or whether it's shots or whether it's, wearing an opponent down. And so, we just try to really break the game down into those facets: the face-off game, the riding game, the clearing game. We say in the clearing game, we want to clear 85% of the time, knowing that, we are going to fail. And it's okay because we want our guys to take a shot, to throw the ball over the top. And so, if you clear the ball 20 times in a game, and if you're 17 out of 20, the goal is not perfection. The goal is to be consistent, be really good. And so that was reason for the goals. Every team is different, and I think the beauty of it is you can ramp it up. If you don't like 85% in clearing, you can go to 90. One of the things we're going to do this year is we're going to evaluate the difference between transition offense, in the box offense, and then subbing offense. When you're subbing people on and off the field, or, what we would call it kind of long dodge offense, where people are long dodging out of the box, and it's kind of like you didn't get transition, but you're not really in the box 6-on-6, and there's this hybrid now. And so can we make some plays in those hybrid situations? And we're going to start setting goals there as well.
I always remember building off that. We had a lot of the team meetings the night before games, and sometimes you would bring up those stats from the last week or maybe a couple nights before, and then it would kind of frame that goal setting for the game this coming week. And I just remember even just touching on in the box offense, when we were shooting for maybe 30 or 35%, it just gave such context, like, hey, we only had 20 possessions in the box. If you had 6 or 7 goals, all right, well, if you only score 6 or 7 goals against a Notre Dame, you need to produce goals in other facets. I always loved just the way that you broke it down. And if you could score a goal here or 2 goals there, that's how you get to 14, 15, et cetera.
And what it does is it takes the pressure off the individual. In our, if keeping possession and, getting a ground ball takes pressure off your really good offensive players to feel like they have to make a play every time in the box, or the goalie has to make a save every time. And you're right, offensively, we used to say, hey, listen, can we get a goal a game or a goal a half off the face-off game? The man up is a little unpredictable because you may only be man up once or twice, but can you score in transition? Can you score off the ride? And that's how you're going to get to 14 or 15. You're not going to get to 14 or 15 in the box, because then you're just rolling the ball out, because then your team's pretty good. They don't need coaching.
Well, Coach, I think that's one thing that, you always talked about with the challenge in the World Games, with the different format, different rules, different clock. What was really cool was after each game, you would basically take a poster board with the other coaches and break out all those parts of the game and those stats and those numbers. And you would talk about in a college game what they would look like and how the international game was different. And what that did was really make it real, the impact of, how the value of a possession in the box offense, the value of a clear when you're not getting as many possessions. So for me, that was one of the things I took away from the World Game experience, was how well you guys simplified the game using numbers, because I think for us, it made it really real. It's like, okay, they're not just saying this, here's hard numbers to show us we're only getting, 70% of the normal possessions you would get in the game because the ball's not going back and forth as much.
I think one of the things about, the experience with you guys, on that level, is that the best players, still need feedback. Need feedback. Hey, where do we get, what cannot be measured cannot be improved upon. So if we're just talking in generalities, I get it. I guess you can improve, but by having some numbers, it allows people to take a look at that and to say, hey, this is an area that we can get better at. Though this is an area that I want to take ownership, as a player or as a leader, as the leader of the man down team, or the face-off group, or the, whatever. Here are the things that we can do to help the team be successful.
We got one more quick question here from Chris Spillane. Another good question. Question is, how do you guys go about installing your systems? Really maybe looking at you get new freshmen in each year, guys graduate, you might want to implement some new things. How do you think about getting your players up to speed with the things you want to do, giving them resources, the way you use film to teach? It seems that you're a team that always seems very disciplined in the spring, seems very methodical in the way you operate. So curious about how you guys have gone about implementing your systems with your players throughout the years.
Well, we're actually, that's a great question, because we're actually going through that right now. We have 10 new freshmen, and we have 9 fifth-year transfers, which is a lot. As the pandemic era is coming to an end here, this will be the last year for that. So, we have 19 new players, and that's what? That's about 35% of the roster. And so, what we're trying to do is, first of all, before we do any drill, we'll just talk for a minute. just about what it is that we expect in the drill. We'll talk about vocabulary. Offensively, I get to work with the attack every day, and right after we stretch, we have an individual period. So yesterday, for example, we worked on feeding, and we worked on, dodging from behind the goal, getting to 5-and-5, and then throwing the ball backwards, double, right? Throwing the ball back to the X. And then we worked on throwing it forward. And then we worked on throwing the ball through the defense and then inside. And the idea is that once you get up to 5-and-5, there's nothing else in this sport of lacrosse that you can do. But the vocabulary is very simple. It's double, forward, inside, through. So now not only can we communicate with the players, but they can communicate with each other. So, if Deemer comes off the field and says, hey, Matt, next time, look through the defense because they're sliding early. Second slide is collapsing on the crease. I'm open through the defense, that you'll know what it means. And so, really it's individual technique first, then it's group technique, and then it's team. And, we go slower. We're probably a little more advanced. I'm really impressed with the IQ of this particular group, but every team is different. And there's going to be where 45 guys get it and 3 don't. And we always have to remember that the freshmen will always shake their heads up and down and say they got it when they have no idea. They're just trying to survive. They don't want to look bad. And so, we know there's going to be a lot of repetition between now and February. So we go slow, individual, we stop. And yesterday, probably there were 3 times where I would blow the whistle. I would say instant replay. Everybody would back up a couple of steps, and then we would explain what we expect, and then go do it, and give the guys a chance to be successful.
I like that last point a lot because I feel like it's very easy to call out a correction, but then just move on to the next rep. And a lot of times you might have said it earlier, like a kid will just be like, yes, coach, got it. And they don't got it, and so when you actually make them do it and then they see that success, that's, I've always thought that was such a great way about how you teach things and get the whole staff to do that. Cause then you actually learn it, and then you can apply it.
Well, yesterday we had a fifth-year senior come down with a stick in his inside hand, an occurring situation, a pull. Maybe he comes in and just checks the stick and the ball goes to the ground, right? You got to put your stick to the outside so your body is between the ball and the defender. Now, I know he wants to impress us. He wants to impress everybody, and he doesn't want, he feels more comfortable with the stick in his left hand, but you got to put it in your right hand. Now, the attackman, you got to do your boy a favor. You either got to get out of his way, or, you got to break in and out, or the next attackman will show up. And so, we had to talk to the attackman about 2 guys getting some chemistry. We had to talk about helping a brother out. And then we had to show them exactly what to do in that situation. And then they did it. And then you pat yourself on the back as a coach. You're like, hey, nice job. Hey. And nobody ever pats him, and that's because that's your job.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. And we're going to have a segment a little later where we get into more of the philosophies because I feel like there's so much to unpack there. But one of the things that Matt and I were really excited to do with this podcast is also unpack some of the background and the upbringing and people that, helped make these coaches who they are. And, we'd love to hear a little bit of the early years of your life, your early years coaching, and, talk about some things and people that impacted you and your upbringing and influenced the man you are today.
Well, I grew up in a town where athletics was just part of our lives. My dad was a junior high phys ed teacher. My brother was a high school history teacher, football and lacrosse coach. My dad was a football coach. Their friends were football coaches, lacrosse coaches, basketball coaches. So, everything that I heard around the dinner table, or I heard, when friends came to visit, was about athletics, was about the local high school, was about East Meadow High School, was about the team, was about guys, was about what they were going through, what their futures were going to be like, if they were good students or not, everything that coaches talked about in those days. And so by the time I got to junior high, it was really important. Now, school was really, at the time, this is the height of the baby boom, of the boomers. So there were 1,000 kids in my senior class, and tremendous competition to make every team that you ever tried out for. So whether it was 7th grade football, 9th grade basketball, it was a tryout, it was a process. And so you learned about competing, you learned about being coachable, listening to the coaches. What is it they expect? What do they want? And then you end up hanging out with guys who had similar visions than you, as you, who wanted the same things, who wanted to be on a team, who wanted to be successful. Our coaches were demanding and tough and consistent, whether it was football or basketball or lacrosse in the spring, the message was always the same. It was team first. It was about being a good, person. Back in the day, students got paddled, which is going to sound, right? I mean, I saw the biggest, strongest, and actually we had a guy who went to the University of Maryland when I was a sophomore in high school, and my coach, Jack Cayley, God bless him, and he's in the Lacrosse Hall of Fame. And our assistant coach was Alan Lowe, who played at University of Maryland. And he loved this guy, right? Loved him, but he crossed the line, right? So I watched him get the paddle when I was a sophomore and he was a senior, and I never wanted to cross that line. And to this day, I don't know what that line was or what he did, but I know I didn't want to cross it. And, but that's, and we all respected that. And the parents respected that. Well, what did you do wrong? What did you do to deserve that? Because they knew that the coaches had the best interests of everybody, in mind. So I was really, and our junior high coaches, taught us the fundamentals of the sport. They knew they were preparing us for the next level. The 9th grade football coach knew he was preparing you for JV football. The JV football coaches knew they were preparing you for varsity football. It wasn't necessarily trying to win, and I think that, and that was really important, to our success. We had more success in lacrosse than we did in high school. But, along the way, they were not dissimilar from our parents. And basketball, we had very little success, but boy, it was great. I love, you ran out in the court on Friday night, and we all thought we were the New York Knicks. Man, we thought that the gym was Madison Square Garden, and it was 8:00 Friday night. Let's play. So we learned how to compete. We learned how to be angry with losing. We learned how to never accept it. We learned how to, like I said, be coached, but be with guys who wanted to compete. And the team, to me, my brother was 14 years older than me. And maybe this is a character flaw that I have. I was kind of an only child, so I gravitated towards the team. I gravitated towards having friends, and, the locker room afterwards was just the greatest place in the world. The excitement of building up in football for the week, it was nothing like Saturday afternoon, playing football. And in the lacrosse piece, there was a history and a tradition that we wanted to keep up in our town, because East Meadow was really good when we were growing up. So we wanted to uphold that tradition. So we learned about loyalty, tradition, teamwork, competition. We had no choice. You didn't, or you weren't engaged.
Sounds like, and I kind of knew this about you, but coaches were some of the main people in your life growing up, whether, your dad or what your coaches were some of the main people in your life that really impacted you. Sports, being on a team was meaningful to you. I can relate to that. Was there a particular coach that you remember more than others as like having a profound impact on making you want to become a coach, or you're just like, I want to coach like that guy? And the way he carried himself, characteristics that really form you to this day, you still think about that?
Matt, I think in some ways my dad had a greater influence than I give him credit for. My dad was one of those men, he grew up in the Depression. He played for the New York Giants, for 8 years. And then went in the Navy, during World War II. One of those men who didn't speak much of their accomplishments, never spoke of their accomplishments. Incredibly humble. By the time I knew him, I was born later on in his life, right? He was like 44 years old. And he was now he's a ninth grade, he's a phys ed teacher and a ninth grade football coach. And again, never spoke about his time with the Giants, never spoke about being in the Navy, never spoke about really being the head coach at Fordham football. But I saw the impact that he had. For example, I still remember to this day going to the bank. I used to go to the bank on Fridays to cash your check in the old days. This is like, talking about stuff that, people are probably forgetting. I remember seeing, his former players who were in high school come up to him. And I just remember the affection. You could feel it. I might have been 9, 10 years old or 11, but the affection that these young men who were my role models had for him. And there was something there, there was something that they were connected. And when I look back, when you asked me that question, I think that was probably, I wanted to make a difference when it was my turn, to see if I could make a difference in somebody's life.
That's amazing. I think that's really cool to hear about, and something that Matt and I have certainly talked about recently is just as we're coaching and just trying to be better as coaches, just if we can make any difference, it makes it that much more fulfilling.
There's no doubt. There's, people look at coaching and they think it's easy from the outside. I think we know it's not easy. It's incredibly rewarding, and it's not about it was never about the financial piece and I've struggled with that along my career. I don't know what else I would have done. I don't know, going back to the classroom and teaching 7th grade science was not an option, or being a guidance counselor, was not an option at one point, but, it's a noble profession, and I believe that. I believe in the nobility of coaching.
Coach, that was one of the main things I took a lot away from my experience on USA with you, Coach Amplo, Coach Tierney, Coach Toomey. I think one of the most impactful is when you guys shared your stories about coaching, and that was a great exercise. You had the whole staff do in 12 minutes or less, kind of give us your background. But going into the realities of coaching being a noble profession, because I know it's something that my dad coached my basketball team, but he wasn't a full-time coach. So coaches weren't in my family. When I made the decision to get into coaching, it was a challenge. And I think not a lot of people talk about that, but many coaches deal with that challenge of a career that's maybe more lucrative versus something that is noble, or you feel like you're impacting players. And that's something that after my experience with you guys, the USA staff, just you being vulnerable and sharing that, what it means to you to be a coach, how you became that, I think gave myself, and I know other guys, a lot more confidence in pursuing something that is more meaningful, even if it feels different or a little bit wrong at times.
And Matt, thank you. I appreciate that. But that is, that is what we do experience. We say to ourselves, you get that call from that parent, who just gives it to you, and you're like, what am I doing? I could be doing something else here. And then you gotta, sit back and, and realize that you're making a great impact, for a lot of young men. Or that loss where you make a decision and it blows up and it doesn't work out and you can't sleep at night. I had a good friend of mine who, very successful, right? House out east of the Hamptons, you know, and he said to me once, he goes, I don't know how you do it. He goes, I'm coaching sixth graders, and I'm in a big business meeting during the day, and all I can think about at night, all I can think about is tonight's practice. I'm not paying attention in the meeting. I'm not like, and it's for those of us who get to live it, there's nothing like it.
Coach, we talked about you're heading into your 18th season at Duke, but you spent almost 25 years between CW Post and Hofstra. Can you talk a little bit about that time and how those years shaped your career and some moments and lessons that, you've carried with you from those years?
Thanks, Dean. That's a great question, and I don't mind sharing that because I think it's a lesson for a lot of young coaches. When we were at Post, we didn't have anything. And when I tell you we didn't have anything, we didn't have an office. There was no office phone. I had a milk crate. The standard joke was I had a milk crate. I put it in the trunk of the car, and I had 3 assistant coaches. 2 of them were from my high school, Rich Donovan and Wayne Ament. And Sandy Capitos helped us a little bit one year. Ernie Olson, who we were rival quarterbacks on opening day. And when we were seniors, he was from Massapequa. And these guys were great men, great teachers. The first thing I learned was if you really care about kids, then you're going to have a blast, right, with your staff. And so, I learned that immediately. And so that was number one. The next thing is you don't need a lot to coach. We used to show up at 3:00. We were all teaching. We were all doing something full time, and we would roll in together, and we had a practice plan. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to, delegate responsibility, and this is what we believe in. Now, fortunately, both Rich and Wayne, we were from the same high school, and we all played for Jack Cayley. And so, we had a similar vision of what we thought. They played at UMass. I played at Rutgers. Ernie played at Cortland. And, but we had a similar vision of what we believed in. And, we beat West Point. We beat Rutgers. We beat Hofstra. We beat Delaware. And we had kids. And then you learn, here's the other thing I learned at Post, is that if the guys love where they're at and they love each other, you got a chance, and so we used to do things differently then, for sure. But it was, I remember playing Rutgers. There was a track meet in the where we played in the field, in the game field, which was the football stadium. So we had to be on a side field. And so we're playing my alma mater, we're playing at home, kind of bummed out. And we ended up beating them there on a field with no stands, no scoreboard, no anything. But we had a bunch of guys who loved Post. They loved each other. And, it was magic. And I wanted to stay there. I wanted to stay at Post. It's an idyllic campus. It had a lot of potential. And I was making $4,000 as the head coach. And I went to the president of the university and I said, listen, I have my master's in college student development and counseling. I'd like to stay here and be the academic advisor for the athletes. And if I could do that for like $20,000, I'll do it full time. And they said, no, we can't do it. And the Hofstra job had opened up for $6,000. So I saw that they got AstroTurf, they got lights, and a $2,000 raise. So I ended up taking the job. Tommy Postel ends up getting the job, who was a postgraduate, great player, Hall of Fame at Post, and he becomes the full-time academic advisor head coach. So the lesson is the next guy always gets more, right? At Hofstra, very similar. Started part-time. I was an academic advisor at Hofstra for the first year. I was an assistant AD for a couple of years. And Rich Donovan, Wayne Ament came over with me. Nobody was full-time, but we had a blast. We had a chance to compete now at a little bit higher level because Hofstra had this great tradition. And slowly things started to change a little bit. Where I was a full-time coach alone, and you learn how to figure it out. There was no strength coach. You learn how to read books by Boyd Epley, who's the strength coach at Nebraska. You learn how to run a strength program. You become your own academic advisor to your players. You do whatever you have to do. And then eventually Chris Colbeck became the first full-time assistant. Billy Wilson, who's the head coach of Air Force, was our second full-time assistant. Then it was Joe Amplo. Seth Tierney came along as a volunteer. Ron Caputo came along as a volunteer, Sean Smith. We never got to two full-time assistants when I left in 2006. We just had one full-time assistant. But you figured it out. You had no other option. And I think the thing is that you learn, once again, we were good at Hofstra when the guys really liked each other, and I'll use the word love. If they loved each other and they loved the place, then you always had a chance.
Coach, one thing that you mentioned there, but I noticed, and it's actually something that I've tried to prioritize, is you mentioned that having a blast with your other coaches is a really important for the team dynamic. And I couldn't agree more. And it's not something you think about as a coach, but the players see it, and it changes the energy of the environment on the team and the culture when they see that the coaching staff genuinely enjoys being there and with each other. They become human and approachable. I remember with USA stuff, that's, you, Coach Amplo, Coach Tierney, Coach Jimmy, you guys would walk into rooms cackling about some inside joke you had about nothing we knew that you were talking about, but it lightened the mood for us who, whether it was tryouts or going to the World Games, we felt a lot of pressure, and it took a lot of that pressure out of the room and made it very enjoyable to be there. So that's one thing you mentioned, but I took that away as, wow, that changes a full team dynamic of just enjoying being with the people you're around, especially as coaches.
That was really important to me when choosing the staff, that Joe was the first person that I called, and then Seth reached out. And the first time we did it was Tony Resch. And Tony Resch is maybe one of the greatest men on the planet. There's no one of higher character or integrity or brilliance that I've ever met. And Tony was, he always used to joke, hanging out with the three Long Island guys, how he didn't fit in, but he was incredible. And Charlie is just another great human being. So first is you got to be a great person, right? You want to spend time with, right? So you want to surround yourself with great men, but having fun was really important on those USA teams because we wanted guys to want to be on that team. The guys want to be on the team for the status, but we wanted them to be on the team because we thought that it was going to be something special and different. And we wanted them to have just this extraordinary life experience. Winning, sure, but we wanted everything along the way. If we had lost in Israel, we still wanted everybody to say, that was great. Same thing in San Diego. If we had lost on the last day, man, I wouldn't have changed anything, maybe some X's and O's or whatever, but we wanted guys to walk away saying, that was I just had a time of my life.
It's been cool for me to hear about Matt's experience with you, Coach, and USA. And we were just comparing a lot of similarities, and he would tell me some stories, and it just would bring me back to my time in my 4 years. And I feel like you brought up a lot of those messages, to us at Duke too, in terms of this, even when you're going through the recruiting process, you want guys that want to be there. And when they want to be there, when they love each other, that was when the magic happened. You had more fun, and those were my best memories.
And you see it on the field. You see teams that are connected. You see teams that are either connected. And listen, sometimes you fall short physically. Sometimes your opponent's better. Sometimes the officials, no. But sometimes, and all that's part of competition. But everything that happens day to day, all the time, on the field, off the field, in the locker room, on the buses, dining hall, in college, Matt, the time if you tell me about San Diego, I'll think about breakfast and lunch.
Yep.
Think about everybody sitting together outside, on the veranda. I remember Jesse Bernhardt getting fined because by the judge of the Kangaroo Court, because he sat next to the coaches like
coach's pet fine.
Yeah. I listen, I'll think about the gold medal game, and I'll think about the crowd and all that, but I'll think about the lunch first, the lunches that we had.
I remember that vividly. Now that you mention it, that's funny. I'm smiling. We had, Deemer and I have spoken a number of times, not just for this podcast, but just, I'd be like, hey, did Coach D do this with you guys? Cause I was so I would come off cracking up about something that was funny, or just with such an interesting experience from that whole Team USA process. And we actually put together a little list here where Coach D has all these little small life skills that he just weaves through the fabric of his coaching. And I was asking Deemer, is that intentional? Is that just him riffing off the cuff? Is that just who he is? And so we have a few of these things that, Coach, if you want to elaborate on a few of them, some of them we had were presenting team meals together. Another
Sure.
one was introducing yourself to strangers. I remember at USA, you would ask us if we knew the name of the girl that was working at the front desk of the dorm, because you expected us to go start conversation and small talk, post-practice talks with the guys, and maybe anything else that you do that are these little, not really related to anything on the field, but they tie together in a bigger way.
The presenting the meal, that kind of started with Mike Catalino in 2010. I'm not even quite sure why we did it, but he did. Mike now is a neurosurgeon, and he was presented it was like ground ball bacon, and he had all these witty kind of, and was like, all right, we'll just keep this going, so I stole that from Mike Catalino. Again, I don't even know why we began that one. But the other things, it's like the little things are it's fun stuff, but recognizing the fact that we have a responsibility to teach whenever we can. And the thing about introducing yourself to the girl who was in the dorm, it just struck me as, here's this one time for her to have an impression of maybe lacrosse. Maybe she knows nothing about lacrosse. Maybe she knows nothing about USA lacrosse, but now she's going to leave with this impression that, oh, geez, these guys were gentlemen. They were funny. They were good guys. And she's going to remember that the rest of her life, that the impact that you guys would have on her, would be tremendous. And so, we always kind of look for those little things that, what's going to separate you. Father Mike Martin, who now is Bishop Martin at the Diocese of Charlotte, but he used to work here at the Duke Catholic Center. He was the head of the Catholic Center, and he called the concept bleeding through. And Deemer, I don't know if he spoke to the team about that when you were there, but he said, hey, what you do in the classroom, in the residence hall, in the weight room, at practice, in the locker room, on the field, everything bleeds through. And so there's if you want to live this extraordinary life, which we all do, right, then we have to get out of our comfort zone from time to time and learn some new skills. And that's where that kind of stuff comes from.
I think that stuff is really important, and it's stuff that I've thought about more as I've started coaching. And, even one thing I've tried to do recently is, in some trainings, instead of me teaching the drill, try to empower a player to teach the drill and have them go through it and speak in front of their peers. And I credit all of that mindset to you and those different situations you kind of put us in. And I feel like we all left better people because of it. And it's really cool to hear you speak about. And I remember even when I committed, to come play for you, I knew I was going to become the best version, hopefully, of myself, because you cared about so much more than just the lacrosse part. and I always thought that that was really special.
I also think that, again, back, growing up, these men were preparing us for that, preparing us for life afterwards. We didn't know it at the time. We didn't know that, discipline or, going to class or, taking your hat off, making great eye contact or being respectful was going to prepare us. We just, they were hammering it in our, in our brains. We had to wear a tie and jacket every day on game day in high school in lacrosse. And if you didn't, and we had to have this paper that was pinned to a pocket on our sports jacket, and it would say beat whoever we were playing. So if we were playing Uniondale High School, it would have to say beat Uniondale. And if coach saw us in the hallway and you didn't have that on there, you didn't play in the game. He didn't see you. And he didn't care who you were. And you didn't really understand, like, why. That's so important, man, come on. And it's like, no, he was teaching us that everybody's doing it. The team is doing it. Everybody is sending a message. So when you walk in the hallway and you look at somebody's jacket, you're getting focused, for 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he had a, way about him. And so, the things that we learned when we were younger, we realized that, it carries, and listen, at the end of the day, none of us want in our tombstone, wins and losses. I mean, that's a factor of, did you have good players? Did you have a little bit of luck? We all want that, I think we'd all like to be remembered that we made a difference.
Yeah, Coach, I have one memory that I'll share, and then Deemer, if you want to advance it, because I know we have another topic you want to get to. From sitting outside in San Diego at the lunch table near you and Coach Amplo, and you were talking, you guys had gone to some meeting or some presentation you to go to, and you felt like it was an opportunity for somebody to deliver a really great presentation, and maybe it wasn't as great as it could have been. And it was fine, you said, but I remember you saying, wow, you have the opportunity to captivate an audience, and spoke about this opportunity to do something great. And it really stuck with me because I've given presentations, had to speak before, and been like, I'm nervous. I just want to do it right, but never thought about it as this opportunity and this moment to really have an impact and leave people leaving that meeting or that day, that practice, like, wow, that was special. And that's something that stuck with me. I gave a best man speech for my friend, and I was really nervous about it. And that moment sat in my head as I was like, I'm going to take that mindset, not being nervous, knowing I have one chance to do it, and try to make it really special. And that was one thing you and Coach Ampo talked about. That moment sat in my mind for a while. I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, very cool. And it's, we all have those opportunities. And it always amazes me how people don't really get that, don't get that fact that, we only get, several shots at some of these things, and why not? Why not be special? Why not be, great at what you do? And that's very cool to hear, Matt.
Coach, before we get into some stuff around some actual coaching philosophies and building on some of the stuff you've already touched on, one thing I always remember you saying is that, Duke is a special place. And there's a few guys that you would bring around the program over time of my 4 years, and I'm sure there's been others that, seemed like you really formed some great connections with, and maybe were mentors or coaches or people that have shaped some of your career. Who are some of those people that come to mind from your Duke experience, and how have they impacted you?
I'm just going to, I'll go back, I'll rewind a little bit to 2 guys at Hofstra. Dan Quinn is the coach of the Washington Commanders, right? Raheem Morris was on the same staff with Dan at Hofstra, was a grad assistant. He's the coach of the Atlanta Falcons, right? Big win last night. I texted both of those guys after their wins last week. They got back to me within 15 minutes. These guys are NFL head coaches and don't have to get back to me ever, and I'd be fine with it. But when you talk about grounded, really good men, and the bonds that are created between coaches and but even more than that, they're just really good men, right? And so those are just two examples of people that and none of us, listen, when we were all at Hofstra, I was never thinking, well, I'm going to be the head coach at Duke one day. And Raheem is saying, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to be the head coach of the Falcons. And Dan Quinn saying, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to be the head coach of Washington. Yeah, we were all making, $18,000, or Raheem was probably getting free tuition. He probably wasn't making any money. But couple of the people that we've got to meet here, certainly Coach K, has been a good friend. He's been really, if we ask him if he, for something, gold medal, the night before the gold medal game in 2018 in Israel, we piped in a call, and he spoke to the team for about 20 minutes, which was incredibly inspiring. And so, he was able to do that for us.
One thing that we've seen a lot recently, I've spoken about, is how the game of lacrosse itself in the last decade since we were in college has really evolved and changed. Wondering your thoughts on just like the general, obviously the shot clock's a thing, the Canadian influence of the game. What have you seen over the last decade as far as the game of lacrosse changing itself at the collegiate level?
It seems like every several years we're wrestling with rule changes, right? And things to make the game better. Now, I've never really had a problem with the game at any level at any time, and coaches adjust very quickly. I think one of the major changes, and this is going to sound a little strange, is everybody's got at least, this is before the volunteer piece, which is relatively new, but everybody had 3 full-time coaches and everybody had video. There were no surprises. You could over coach, a tremendous in terms of preparation, each week during game week. So that, you have to work really hard to be creative or inventive or come up with things, that maybe your opponent hadn't seen. And so I think that's one. The shot clock, I don't know that I think the game is faster. I don't know that I'm going to say it's better, but everybody's learned how to sub. The transition piece of lacrosse is kind of disappearing, because everybody gets on and off the field really fast, and teams are so disciplined offensively, nobody really takes bad shots. So if it's the end of a shot clock, people are bailing and running to the box. If, again, people are so, kids are, they're not winding up from 14 yards and shooting, and goalie's making a save and the ball's going the other way. People are somewhat deliberate clearing the ball to get their people, their personnel on the field. So the game in some ways is faster because of the shot clock, but in some ways it's slower because of the shot clock, if that makes sense, right? And so at the end of the year, the emphasis is in the box. In February, you can try to ride and you can try to get up and down, but the game changes in March and April. And really to a point where if you're not operating at a really high end in the box defensively, 7 versus 6, and offensively, that you're not going to advance in the tournament.
Coach, as you think back to that and kind of the evolution of it, how do you compare your perspective on fundamentals? Has that evolved? Has it stayed the same? I think back to my experience, a lot of the two-handed ground balls and finishing it in the dirt and rolling away from pressure. How have you balanced, keeping some of those core fundamentals with also the evolving creativity of the game?
Yeah, I think, I just had this actually talk with the guys on Tuesday, because we're, ramping it up in the 20-hour weeks, and a couple of our freshmen got caught going after ground balls with one hand, put the guys on the end line, that's non-negotiable, and then I'll explain why. Because in the big game, when you're playing against Carolina and Virginia and Notre Dame and Syracuse and, Denver, and that defenseman's 6'4", and he's got a 6-foot pole, and he is going to come down hard on your, arms and wrists, one hand is probably not going to work. So if you run through with two hands and you come up with it and, you know, been able to move it off the ground, we're playing the percentages, fellas. No, and I'll say, listen, we get that maybe you're on the sideline and you're going to use your free arm to shield the defender. And yeah, there is a time and place for it. But 95% of the time, we need you to pick the ball up with two hands. You know, the turn the corner has changed a little bit in that nobody gets really hit anymore. Matt will tell you this, that, you know, in the college game, maybe even the pro game, you know, officials are so wary of contact, hits to the head, that the flag goes up. You know, the good solid hit of the old days is really just about disappeared. And so it used to be a badge of honor, you know, that you turned the corner and you took the hit and scored the goal. Your teammates will pick you up, dust you off, and let's line up for the face-off. It's still important, but there's just less contact than ever before. And the other day that, you know, one of our fifth years, he was a left-hander. He's driving from the X. He's coming up to 5-and-5. He throws it behind the back and he throws a perfect pass, you know, to a cutter inside. And, you know, I had to explain that, listen, the behind the back pass is appropriate for the guys who can do it. But as a coach now, you got to decide, does Deemer get special dispensation, but Matt doesn't, because Matt is not that good at it and would rather Matt just move the ball? Or do I make a blanket statement, say nobody can? So I had to say afterwards, I said, listen, there's a time and a place. Again, we're playing the percentages. You know, if we trust somebody and he can do it, you know, he's got the green light, but it better work. And I think back, I was in 10th grade, right? I was the only 10th grader brought up to the varsity, and we're playing Garden City High School. And they had these big, strong guys, and it was a home game. I caught the ball. I was at the X, and somebody had the ball up top, threw me the ball. I caught it. I stopped, and I shoveled the ball in, like, you know, backhanded, and it went in the goal. Roddy Ruhlman, who played at Virginia, was All-American, was the goalie. Everybody's going nuts. The kids on the sideline are freaking screaming, and everybody's going crazy. Coach pulled me out. Coach Kelly said, Dino, nice shot. Don't ever do it again. All right. I didn't do it again. You know, part of that sticks with me. You know, part of that is like, I know what he was saying. He was saying you got lucky. It worked one time. Next time, turn and shoot or turn away, you know. And so we explain it. And that's where, you know, and I think I've always done that. Yeah, I've always explained that, hey, Deemer can drop his hands. All right. He can do that. Miles, you can't drop your hands. You shoot overhand. All right. But Deemer can, because he's good at it. He works really hard at it. And, you know, we're not going to say anything when he does. You know, and there is this fine line.
It is a fine line. And I actually remember a funny story. I think it was my senior year, and Matt was probably a little frustrated on a man up segment. And I think I missed a few underhands, like in practice. And he turns to all the guys and he's like, hey, someone going to tell this guy to shoot it overhand? And I kind of look back at him like, dude, I've been doing this since my freshman year. What are you talking about? But like, to your point, there's that balance of like, hey, you know, play the percentages, but then also you always emphasize being a player. That was like one of my favorite lines that you said, was be a player, and you got to pick your spots in a way too.
And you know, that's the one thing, Matt, I think you asked, and I'll say this, that the kids come to us more skilled than ever. Great skills. You know, we don't have to spend a lot of time on the skills, but being a player, understanding the game, having a high IQ, anticipating, that comes from other sports. That comes from football. That comes from being a wideout and running a route, a disciplined route, or a defensive back and having leverage, or playing inside out, or basketball, you know, opening up in the passing lane, you know, and putting your arm out to discourage the pass, you know, on the backdoor cut. Those are the things that, the kids are not coming with. Great, highly skilled, but the IQ piece is behind.
Yeah, I always felt I started playing defense in lacrosse in 7th grade, but I played basketball my whole life. And I always felt it was such an easy transition into the sport, playing basketball. For me, that was my main other sport. And you get so many more reps of the same principles in basketball than you will in a lacrosse field. Smaller space, the ball moves quicker, you're rotating all the time. And so I always try to advise players at an early age that want to focus on lacrosse. Like, the best thing you can do is play another sport that you enjoy and try to get really good at it, because that will carry over into a way that no coach on a lacrosse field can really get you as good as your head turns off the ball as you'll get playing hockey or basketball, or maybe being a middle linebacker in football. So that's a piece interesting to hear you say, because for me, and I know Deemer as well, playing those other sports was a big part of our, journey as athletes.
Well, if you look at all the high end players, take a look at the tours and winners, right? Well, you got a couple of guys. Doug Shanahan, who was the first, he made it to the last cut of the Jets, right? You got guys who are playing pro basketball. You got guys who are playing in the NFL. You got guys, I'm going to say that 95% of those guys were multi-sport athletes in high school. Our best players in our sport, we're multi-sport, we're multi-sport athletes. There's no doubt. And, and in recruiting, when people ask us, what are you looking for? And we'll say, we're looking for somebody who has the things that we cannot coach, that they know it already. The JT Giles Harris, football, basketball, lacrosse. In fact, his lacrosse team was the worst team of the 3 teams he played on. And so it's that's not the issue. It's the things, Matt, that you just mentioned.
Coach, when it comes to the decision making and the instincts, obviously part of that is stuff that you can't teach. It comes from the other sports. I think that makes a ton of sense. I feel like with your background and how you've always approached things, you weave a lot of the mental game into your teaching of things, And so, like, one, how do you do that? I feel like sometimes you could look at a play and be like, hey, you should have thrown it here. You got to hit the wall. You got to do these X's and those things differently. But I always felt like you took it a deeper layer and thought about what's holding this player back from making this play, or why are they not seeing that? How do you try to weave the mental component into the player development?
That's the thing that one of the things as a coach, we came up with this a long time ago at Hofstra. Somebody would make a play during the game, and one of my assistant coaches would say, I can't believe he did that. And I would say, do we coach him to do that yet, or not to do that? And they would look at me and go, you're right. And you can see that sometimes kids will make mistakes and they'll be in a situation that's brand new. Or just because we see it, it doesn't mean that, why aren't they seeing it? Are they afraid to make a mistake? Is it they're not confident? Maybe they're driving down the left alley and they're right-handed and they don't want to throw it inside lefty. They'll carry it lefty and maybe they'll throw it forward lefty, but they don't want to throw it inside, and then say, well, then we've got to drill that more, because clearly they're not ready to make that play yet. And that's on us. I think as a coach, you need to know the difference between, what they can do instinctively, what they need, what you think you need them to do, and help them with that. And so, I think we've always worked hard at looking at film, game day, and then saying, all right, let's create some drills to be better at, X, Y, and Z, whatever facet of the game it was.
Is that like your typical way of developing drills? Because it's something interesting. I know Deemer's always told me how focused you and your staff have been on developing player technique. Are there go-to drills you guys always do, or do you reverse engineer kind of these scenarios that you want guys to get better at? So if it's a guy that won't feed it to the inside, do you have the drill that you go to for that? Or do you say, hey, it's kind of this scenario, let's put a couple guys here and make it look like this look we do all the time and reenact that scenario with the guys?
I think it's a bit of both. There's some standard drills, the scrapping. We're starting to scrap now, and so we do that every day where it's a ground ball drill. But we started our 8-hour weeks with something really different. The first 8-hour drill we did was a 1-on-1 plus one. We call it +1+1, where we would dodge down the alley, and the defender would allow the offensive player to go down the alley. His job is don't let him roll back. And then the inside, we had the inside offensive player, and all he could do was start on the back pipe and seat cut. We had an inside slide man, and then we had a through pass. It occurred to me watching film last year that we're still a little bit robotic. We're a little bit like, I want guys to play freer and make better decisions. So slide guy, you've got to make a decision. Is he beat? Then you got to close out and get to his hands. Second slide, then we would put it in a second slide. Second slide, if he goes, you got to be coordinated. You got to go with him. Leave the farthest man away open, basic principles. But offense, get your hands free, shoot. Get your hands free, look inside. Get your hands free, look through. So you got 3 things. Right from the first day, I wanted to overload them and make them realize it's up to you. It's your game. You decide. And let's get better at that. So that's something that we've never done before on the first day, and it was fun. It was fun to watch. And again, no pressure, we told the guys, listen, this is just, this is something that we need to get better at.
Sometimes when we've done some drills like that, you'll see some kids almost even stop like halfway through and be like, is this right? Am I doing it right? And thinking back to a lot of the stuff that you had said to us over the time, it's like, just do it, make a decision, and then we learn from the decision. We can watch the film. We can, and I think like when you incorporate that decision making into those kind of drills, you're really getting into the meat and potatoes of what's happening so much on the field.
So many of our guys here, I can speak to our guys, is they're so compliant. They want to please the coach. They want to get the A. They want to look good in front of their peers. And I'm probably true everywhere. I'm not just speaking about Duke. I'm probably, this is a blanket statement. How do you get rid of that a little bit? Now, that's all good, right? That's all positive. But how do you just make the right play and don't worry about what I think. Don't worry about what the coaches think. And it's okay to fail. We're telling you this is practice, and practice is for failure. And if you're going to be perfect every time, well, we got to get you better. And so, by evaluating some weaknesses, that's, like there's a theory, forget about your weaknesses, just play to your strengths. And I would say the opposite. I'm a big fan of be good at everything, because there might be that one situation, one time when you're going to have to make that play. So let's practice that and let's figure out how to get good at it.
One thing I know we wanted to pick your brain on a little bit is obviously an area in lacrosse, and talk about it as little or as long as you'd like. That's different now, and impression for everybody is this change in the NCAA rules and NIL with recruiting. What are you noticing? What's going on from your end that you're seeing the last few years in the college game, from the recruiting to your job with it, and how that's changed what the recruiting process is for an athlete that wants to play college lacrosse?
I think one of the things that, the club thing is so, and it's so important in all these, in all the, and I still haven't figured out where it belongs, right? Because, it's a business. In high schools, if you would ask me what's the, what is the goal of a good high school coach? A good high school coach should teach a young man how to play the game. And then if he's good at it, he'll find his niche. He'll find a place for him to play. Now, we've evolved to the club thing where I got to be on the right club. I've got to be seen. I've got to, the games are kind of meaningless, but they're not. it doesn't matter if we win or lose. I've got to play well. You're not getting coached. You're not getting, practicing. You might be, and you might be really good at your good things, but you're not really working on the things to make you a better player eventually. So it's just kind of, it's kind of strange to still kind of, figure all that out. I think once you figure it out, the competitive factor, 5 games in a weekend, and it's the second game and it's Sunday, and maybe you're watching that young man for the first time and he's exhausted, and how do you factor that in? And so anyway, I think it's really difficult for the kids. I think it's really difficult for the parents, and I think it's difficult for college coaches, to figure out what is a really good evaluation. And for a lot of these kids are 16, when we're talking about September 1st of their, of their junior year. Now, some of them are older, and then how do you factor that in? Well, if they're older and they're better than the 16-year-olds, maybe the 16-year-old is going to be better in 3 years. So it's like, you're working on a big hedge fund, right? And you're trying to figure it out. So the NIL piece for us doesn't exist, right? Now, we don't have, we don't have an NIL program, and we don't do anything with it. But it's coming, like everywhere else. It's if House versus NCAA. Now, there's another lawsuit the other day. Somebody else is suing. So, who knows? But as of right now, there's nothing that's set in stone for September of 25. But we're all preparing for September of 25, meaning, the 48 roster spots, meaning, quote, no more scholarship limits. Now, for some schools, that might be less scholarships as they try to balance with Title IX. All the football programs are going to get an extra 20, right? Men's basketball is going to get an extra 2. So those are 22 more men's scholarships. Where does that come from? Does that come from the athletic department? Does that come from their own universities? Do you take away 22 other men's scholarships to offset that so it's equal with the women, if you have balance now? Do you give 22 more to the women? It's like nobody knows the answers to that, just yet. The NIL, starting in February 25, the collectives can be run by the athletic departments. So now, instead of being outside electives, if you make a tax, like Deemer says, you know what, I want to give $10,000, to the Iron Dukes, which is Dukes fundraising, and that'll get me basketball tickets, right? That'll get me, then I can buy basketball tickets in Cameron. Now, let's say that the minimum donation is like $8,000. And then he says, well, I want to put the other $2,000 in the collective. Now we can start doing that, and he can get the tax write-off for all $10,000. Where if he just gave it to the collective previously, there was no tax incentive. I would never ask anybody to give money, to give to our guys who, there was no, that's just kind of tossing away your money. So, it's a really, it's a really difficult, now coaches got to be fundraisers, or people have to fundraise. And as we all know, people are going to fundraise for football and basketball. Football has got to be number 1 at the Power 5 schools, Power 4, right? Because that's got to sustain the program. Basketball has to be number 2. Women's basketball has to be number 3. You hope that you fall in line somewhere, and that your staff members are going to work on your behalf, but nobody quite knows how it's going to be done yet. And that's, I think we're all waiting for an answer, but none of us have one.
You mentioned parents a little bit, and obviously the whole dynamic that you just alluded to is very uncertain. We get all kinds of questions from parents about the process and, what's going to happen and how to think about it. We've had several attend your prospect days over the years, and parents have specifically come back and noted that your speech to the parents was amazing, like very impactful, which I thought was cool to hear. Can you share any of those main messages that you're sharing with them that in today's game, hey, you mentored Matt through his process and his career, but what kind of messages are you sharing with the parents these days?
Yeah, I love doing that, right? I love getting in front of the parent groups because they need to be educated, and I'm really honest with them. It's listen, I've been, like you said, I've been in their shoes with a daughter who played at Quinnipiac, and a son who played at Duke, and so I get it, and it's hard, and school's getting expensive, and with financing, and you want what's best for your son, and they've spent a lot of time and effort and energy and money to get to that, to get to those places where they're at prospect days and camps and clinics, so on. So first thing I'll say is it's the academic piece is first and foremost, right? Students got to learn to love to learn and to challenge themselves. They've got to put themselves in position and take the best courses for them, honors, APs, which will help separate them from other candidates. Now, you're not going to take AP calculus if you don't have the math gene, but maybe there's another one where you can stretch yourself and push yourself, because that will separate you from other candidates. And who knows where you're going to be at in 2 or 3 years, as you're a 9th grader, 10th grader, and so on. That's the first thing. Second thing we talked about is being a multi-sport athlete, as Matt alluded to, and Deemer, you have, play the sports that, again, Matt said this, that you like to play. Don't play football if you hate it. Don't run cross country if you don't like running, but do wrestle, play hockey, play basketball, but don't be a lacrosse guy all year round. I say it makes you boring and dull. And you only have one time in high school. You only have one time to run out of the tunnel and run onto the field and be with these guys and make friends, and learn from all different coaches. So, be an athlete all year round. We drive a huge point about learning, being a really good person, learning how to serve others, learning to be a leader by serving others, being coachable, being a good person. And then, we try to scare them with the social media and the phones and how that, nobody on your deathbed says, I should have spent more time watching TikTok. I just didn't watch enough TikTok in my lifetime, and so, the evils that takes away. You could be out shooting for a half hour. You could have been talking to a friend, making eye contact, having a few laughs, telling jokes, doing whatever, as opposed to isolating and just being alone with this and worrying about how many people like what you did or said, or you looking about what they're doing. Live your life first. And then, you can tell people about it. But, and so that's kind of the message, is that, coaches, everybody, I believe in recruiting, everybody ends up where they belong, in the long run. They all end up at that right place. And the other message I send, there's a lot of great places to play lacrosse. It's not just Division I. It's Division II. It's Division III. There's a lot of great schools. Those kids in Division III want to win just as badly as the guys in Division I. And we're seeing, right, and Matt knows this, you're seeing Division III guys who are flourishing, in Division I for a year, in the PLL, right, in the NLL. Guys make that jump. Division II, if the school is right. And then the other message I'll send, is that parents, your son the best, right? Does he belong in a state school with 24,000 kids, 12,000 women? Does he belong in a smaller place? Where does he learn? Does he learn in a big lecture hall? Can he learn? Does he need the support of smaller classrooms? How will we handle it socially? I used to say that there are more kids in one dorm at Ohio State than in the entire Hofstra campus. Now, if you like that big state school, then good for you. But if you like the smaller, then that's good for you. And everybody's different. Everybody's got their journey, and everybody travels their own path.
One word that you've said a lot, especially in the beginning of this podcast, was impact. I think it's a word that you say quite frequently, and I think it's one that I've taken away from you. And I know Deemer and I have both felt the impact from you. One thing we want to do with this podcast is hopefully impact many other coaches that can relate to your message, hear it, either validate what they're doing, encourage them to keep pursuing, maybe get into it, maybe learn a few things to help impact their players better. One final question we want to ask all our guests is, what advice do you have for those coaches, those younger guys, maybe when you were in your 20s or 30s and trying to figure it out and maybe had those moments where you weren't sure, and those guys that want to keep progressing into coaching to either get the next best job or just to keep getting better at it? Is there any advice you would give to maybe that younger self that was you, or these guys and girls that are trying to, keep figuring it out?
You got to trust your gut. You got to listen to your instincts. And, your instincts are your values. Just because I grew up the way I did, and so, my coaching, whether it's style or philosophy or whatever, has evolved to where I am today, doesn't mean that somebody has to copy that. They've got to be themselves, and they've got to just trust and your instincts is your value system, or the things that you hold dear to you, and the things that, Deemer knows, non-negotiables. What are your non-negotiables, as a human being? And are you comfortable with that? And if you're comfortable with your own non-negotiables, then you'll chart your course as a coach to your personality, to where you can go to put your head in the pillow at night and sleep well. I always thought there were some times I used to speak, at the convention, in Baltimore, and I would be talking about culture. People always want to know about culture. And I'm thinking, there's some people that can hear this, and some that it doesn't resonate with them. They just want to be X's and O's. They want to be like, hey, just give me, how do we clear? How do we ride? And that's good enough for them. And that's okay. As long as you have some other people with you that, can, help you with those other things. But trust your instinct, trust your gut, and then you got to be all in. You can't have your toe in the water at anything. If you're all in, then you're going to be great. You're going to make a difference, and you're going to have an extraordinary experience, in coaching.
Coach, I love that final message. I think the authenticity piece is something that you always preach to us, and being yourself and being all in, and it's part of being a student athlete. You didn't, the whole bleeding through concept that you mentioned earlier, with Father Mike, that was during my time, extremely impactful. And I think hearing all these messages come together, was amazing today. And, Matt and I both really appreciate your time, and, really honored that you come on and share so much with us, and hopefully the audience that tunes in. So, we're wishing you the best of luck this fall, and, look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, listen, I really enjoyed my time with both of you guys. I love you both. You guys know that. And what you're doing here is great. It's great for the sport. It's great for the people who are going to listen. And I wish you really the best of luck with it, and hope it's a really huge success.
Thank you, Coach. Thanks for coming on.